There were 9 seats in his restaurant and 3 alphas were sitting in them, and not one of the 3 had come there to eat. Ansel kept his hands moving. His hands were the only part of him that still knew what to do. Behind him, the room had gone quiet in a way it had not gone quiet once in 6 years. The man on the left had a following the size of a small country and a phone he was not even pretending to put away. The man in the middle had been leaving crates at his back door twice a week for 2 years, and had told him why for the first time a fortnight ago, in an alley, badly, and the man at the end of the counter had not said one word to him since he sat down. That part Ansel could have survived. The part he could not survive was that the man had a jaw he saw every morning of his life across a bowl of cereal, on a 6-year-old face. Then the back door opened, and his daughter came in with her homework bag on her shoulder, and the man at the end of the counter turned around to look at her. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Now, back to the story. The morning it happened began like every other morning. In the dark, with the burners already going. Ansel had stopped needing an alarm somewhere in the 2nd year. His body woke him before the phone could, always at the same black hour. And he lay there a minute in the flat above the shoe repair and listened to nothing. There was nothing to listen to. The street below him was a dry cleaner, a shoe repair, a bus stop with a cracked bench, and a 9-seat restaurant with his daughter's name over the door. Nobody came to this street on purpose. That had been the point. He put his hand on the small shape in the bed next to him and said her name, and Nell made a sound like a kettle being taken off and rolled into the wall. "Come on," he said. "You can sleep downstairs." She came down the back stairs with her eyes shut and her duvet dragging behind her, and he steered her by the shoulders through the door at the bottom of them and into the corner booth, where she folded herself into the corner and was asleep again before he had the lights on. He had tried leaving her upstairs exactly once. He had stood in his own kitchen at that hour with the ceiling above him and his heart going like a bird in a box, and he had climbed back up and carried her down, and there was the end of that experiment. Then he washed his hands and the day started. The restaurant was 9 seats along one counter and one small booth in the corner that was not for customers. It had taken him a year to get the ventilation right, and another year to pay for it. The walls were plain, the floor was sealed, and the grout between the tiles was white. He redid it himself every spring, on his knees, on a Sunday, the one day of the week he shut. People who came in for the first time always said the same thing: very clean. They said it in a slightly surprised voice, as though clean were a personality, and he had learned to say thank you and leave it there. There was no menu. There was 1 dish a day, and it was whatever he had woken up wanting to make, and if you did not like it, there was a bus stop outside. That sounded like arrogance, and it was not. It was arithmetic. One man cannot cook 14 things well, and Ansel would rather have shut the doors than send out something he was not proud of. Summer had come in hard that week, and the burners made their own weather. A shirt in that kitchen in August was a wet rag by the end of the first hour, and he was not going to touch food in a wet rag. So he worked in a cap and a clean apron and gloves, and no shirt. He was careful about every part of it. Gloves got changed between the raw and the cooked, and the boards were color-coded. And he washed his hands until the skin at his knuckles had gone permanently a shade paler than the rest of him. He had 2 burn scars up his right forearm from his first job at 19, and a newer one along the inside of his left wrist from a panhandle that had turned, and he thought about them about as often as he thought about his own elbows. The extractor over the burners was the expensive one, and he had bought it twice, and the reason had nothing to do with smoke. An Omega, working alone in a small room with the alley door open, learns early what a kitchen does to a scent, how the warmth lifts it and pushes it out into the street where anybody at all can walk through it. His own was yuzu peel and wet sand with something green underneath. Crushed fennel frond, green and a bit bitter. And in August the burners dragged it out of him whether he wanted them to or not. So he had put in an extractor that could have served a room 3 times the size, and he ran it hard from the first hour, and the men who came in for lunch got nothing off him but food. He put the bones on. He built the base. He worked in the particular silence of a man doing something he has done more times than he can count and still cares about. It is not really silence if you are close enough. It is full of small sounds, the scrape, the tap of the knife going down, the little breath he took before every taste. He was most of an hour in when he heard Nell's feet. "You're supposed to be asleep." "I woke up," she said, like it had been done to her. She climbed onto the stool in the corner at the end of the counter, the one with the cushion he had made out of a folded towel, and she had his phone. He had given it to her months ago as a way of buying a little more time in bed and had regretted it steadily ever since, though not enough to take it back. She watched cooking videos on it. Not cartoons. Cooking. And she had opinions about people who did not season their water. He glanced over and saw her holding the phone up with both hands, elbows braced on the counter, one eye shut. "Are you filming me?" "Yes." "Do I want to know?" "It's for my show," Nell said. Ansel laughed. She had a show every few weeks. The last show had been a tour of the walk-in with commentary. The one before that had been an interview with a lemon. He turned back to the pot and did not think about it again. In his head it was filed with the lemon, under things his daughter did that he would find on the phone weeks later and watch twice in a row sitting on the stairs. He worked out the rest of it later, in pieces. Mostly from her. She had watched her cooking people go live so many times that she had taught herself how. There was a little red circle. She had found it weeks before and used it twice, and nobody had come either time. That morning she propped the phone against the stack of rice sacks so her arms could rest, and she pressed it, and she left it there. "Dad." What is that?" "Bones," he said. "You know it's bones. Say what it is properly." He turned around and looked straight down the lens with nothing on his face except patience. He did not believe for a second that it was really a camera. "It's beef bones," he said. "I roasted them yesterday. When you were doing your reading. You roast them first, because if you don't, the soup tastes like a hospital. That's disgusting." "It's true." "What's the white stuff?" "Onion. Half of it goes in now and half goes in at the end. The first half is for the taste, and the second half is because I like the smell in the afternoon." "That's not a real reason." "It's my kitchen," Ansel said. "I get one unreal reason a day." He heard her laugh behind him and it went straight through him, no stops, same as it always did. He worked and he talked to her exactly as he did every morning, as though she were a small colleague rather than an audience, answering every question she asked seriously, even when the question was whether a carrot had feelings. He explained why he salted at the beginning and again at the end. He explained why he never walked away from the pot in the last stretch of it. When she asked him why he was doing it at that hour instead of a normal hour, he said, without turning around, that if he started later he would have to rush, and if he rushed, somebody would eat something he had not meant for them to eat. Then he pointed the spoon at her and said that if she ever caught him rushing, she had his permission to close the restaurant. "Can I close it now?" "No." "Can I close it Thursday?" "Ask me Thursday," he said, and heard the pencil start up behind him, and knew without turning around that it was going into the homework book in handwriting the size of a shoe. Near the end came the part that made the whole rest of it work, and he did it every single morning without once thinking of skipping it. He took a small bowl, one of the little ones, and out of the great batch he built one perfect single portion. He was quick about it, and he was exact about it. Broth. The meat pulled and laid down flat. A spoon of the pickled radish he had made on Sunday. The greens in and straight back out. A little of the chili oil in a ring, rather than a blob. One piece of the good spring onion cut so thin it curled by itself. It took him no time at all. It looked like something you would see through a window in a city you were saving up to visit. Then he set it on the counter, and he tasted it. He tasted it twice. He always tasted it twice. Once for the salt and once for whatever the first taste had been too loud to hear, and between the two he stopped with his eyes somewhere on the middle of the wall, and his whole face went unguarded, which it only did when he thought he was on his own. "Well," Nell said, "it needs something." "It needs what?" "Vinegar," he said. And then, "No, not vinegar." He stood there another moment. "Yes, vinegar." "You said no." "I changed my mind. I'm allowed. You're eating this now. It's the good one." He turned the bowl so the handle of the spoon pointed at her, which he had been doing since she was 2, and pushed it down the counter with 2 fingers. Nell caught it with both hands. He leaned on the counter with his forearms flat and watched her eat it like other men watch a game. "Is it good?" "It's good," she said, with her mouth full. "Is it as good as Tuesday?" "Nothing is as good as Tuesday." "That is a very hard thing to hear at this hour," Ansel said, and he wiped the counter, and he went to open the front. The phone stayed against the rice sacks for another few minutes, and then Nell remembered it and picked it up. And by then it was already too late. and nothing in his life had ever been too late before. The morning went normally. The regulars came in the order they always came in. Winnie, who had taught at the school 3 streets over for most of her life, who had never taught Ansel anything at all, and had decided some years ago that she was in charge of him anyway, took the second stool and told him about a man on the radio. The taxi drivers came in at the end of their night shift and ate without talking, and he respected that enormously. A young couple photographed the bowl before they touched it, and he had stopped minding about that years ago. At the back door, in the gray part of the morning, Marek came with the crates. He always came before the light. He had 2 vans and his own round, taken over from a man who retired 2 winters back. And he did Ansel first. Ansel was the only client of his awake enough to check the produce properly. And it meant he got a coffee out of it. He smelled of wet denim and horseradish root, sharp and clean, an alpha scent that had never in 2 years come any further than the doorway. He had decided a long time ago that a man who wants something from a doorway should stay in it. "You're going to reject the peppers," Marek said, by way of hello. "Show me the peppers. I'm showing you the good ones first, so you're in a better mood." "That has never worked." "It works a bit," Marek said. He was a big man, 40, and he had a habit of standing with one boot up on the step, so he took up the whole doorway. He held up a crate. Ansel came out into the alley with a towel over his shoulder and went through it, and the 2 of them stood in the cold blue air pulling produce out and turning it over and putting it back, and Marek watched him do it with a face he had been careful, for 2 years, to keep just under the line. "Your knife's still got tape on it." "The tape works." "Buy a knife, Ansel." "I have 11 knives." "Buy a 12th, Marek said, "and I'll stop bringing it up." And Ansel said that he doubted that very much. And Marek laughed and said fair. 2 years of that, twice a week, and neither of them ever went further than the doorway. Marek got in the van, Ansel took the crates in, and the morning went on. It was the middle of the afternoon before anything was wrong, and the first sign of it was that his phone would not stop. He had it face down by the till, and it kept moving across the counter like something with an opinion. He turned it over between orders, and there were more notifications on the screen than he had ever seen at one time. Stacked so deep the phone had given up, and started counting them instead of listing them. His first thought was that something had happened to Nell, and the floor went out from under him for a second, even though Nell was a few steps away with a pencil in her mouth. His second thought was that his account had been stolen. His third thought did not arrive for a long time. When he finally got the thing unlocked, there was nothing available to think. There was a video of him. There were, in fact, a great many videos of him, but they had all come out of the same one, cut into pieces by people he had never met. Every piece had a number under it. He thought of numbers in terms of how many portions were left, so none of it went in. He watched the first one with the sound off, standing behind his own counter, and he did not recognize himself at all. There was a man in a cap and an apron with his back to a camera, and his hands were doing something quick with a knife. A small voice off to the side asked what the white stuff was. The man turned around and said, "It's onion, half now and half later, because I like the smell in the afternoon." He watched himself lean on the counter. He watched himself push a bowl down the wood with 2 fingers so the spoon handle pointed the right way. There was one thing in it none of those people would ever get, and he only worked it out later. Standing in an empty room with the lights off. A phone cannot carry a scent. Every one of them had fallen for half of him, and it was the safe half. He turned the sound on and heard his daughter say, "Nothing is as good as Tuesday," and heard himself laugh. And he had to put the phone down and hold the edge of the counter for a moment. The sound of his own laugh coming out of a machine in front of strangers took the skin off him. "Nell, come here." She came. She looked at the screen. She looked at his face. And being 6, she read it exactly right and got in front of it at speed. "It's my show," she said. "You said it was for your show. It was for my show. Nell." He crouched down so they were level, because he had promised himself, back when she was very small and he was very frightened, that he would never do the important ones standing up. Was that going out? While I was doing it? Were people watching that while it was happening? She thought about lying. He watched her think about it, and he watched her decide not to. "There's a red circle," she said. "Okay." I pressed the red circle. "Okay. Am I in trouble?" He looked at her. She had flour on one eyebrow from the morning, and her fringe needed cutting, and she was braced like children brace, with the shoulders up. No, he said. You're not in trouble. You didn't do anything mean. You did something without asking, and that's a different thing, and we're going to talk about it after we close. He put his thumb on her eyebrow and got the flour off. But no, you're not in trouble. She let all the air out at once and put her forehead on his shoulder, and over the top of her head, he watched the number under the video go up twice. He closed at his normal time and he cleaned down as thoroughly as ever, and it took longer than usual because he kept stopping. By the time he had the floor done, there were people standing on the pavement outside, looking in through the window at a dark room. Not many, but enough that he noticed, and one of them waved. The next morning there were dozens of them before he opened. He came down at his black hour with Nell's duvet over his arm and stopped in the doorway. The queue went past the shoe repair, around the corner and out of sight. Every single person in it was sitting on the ground in the dark with a phone, and the light off all those phones lit the whole street blue. He got Nell into the booth. He put the burners on. He stood in his own kitchen with his hands flat on the steel and made himself breathe. Then he did the only thing he knew how to do. He cooked more that day than he had ever cooked in his life, and it was still gone before the middle of the afternoon. He turned people away for the first time since his opening week. He did it badly. He kept apologizing to strangers who had waited half the day and were, in fairness, very nice about it. And one of them cried, and he had no idea at all what to do with that, so he gave her the bowl he had made for himself and went without lunch. Then he did the same thing the next day, and the day after that. By the end of that week, there was a man at the door with a clipboard who did not work for him. "You need a system," the man said. He was young and horribly awake. "I'm not selling you anything. I'm saying it out loud because nobody else will. You need a list and a cutoff, and somebody on this door who isn't you." "I have someone on this door," Ansel said. "It's me. You're plating and counting the door at the same time. You can't. That's the system." The man wrote his own phone number on the clipboard, tore it off and left it under the water glass. Ansel never rang it, and by the time somebody else did, he had lost most of the ability to feel his own feet. They had the talk about the red circle after close, and it went like most of their talks did. Ansel laid out 3 rules, and Nell got him down to 2. She could film. She could put things on the little account she had made for herself. He went looking for it that night and found it. It had a photograph of a spoon on it for a badge. She could not film live. Not ever. And she could not film customers. And if a customer got into a shot by accident, she had to say so out loud and delete it in front of him. She agreed to all of it very seriously and went on filming, being 6. She also got a tablet out of the negotiation, second-hand, on the condition that it lived on the counter and never went upstairs. He watched her uploads on Sundays for a while. Then the queue got long and the Sundays got shorter and he stopped checking. A wobbly video of a chair is not a thing a tired man keeps an eye on. The bell over the door went, and Dane came in on the second Tuesday. Ansel knew who he was in the way, a face from the side of a bus. He was tall and lit from within by whatever it is that keeps people like that going, and he came in with 2 friends and a small camera on a strap that he made a show of putting away, and he sat down and looked around the room with enormous and completely sincere pleasure. He smelled of eucalyptus and coriander seed, bright and clean, a bit like something you rub into a shoulder. It filled the room the second the door shut, and then, oddly, it did not push at any point. Ansel noticed that and filed it away and did not understand it for weeks. "Oh, this is better than the video," he said, to nobody. "This is so much better than the video." He ate. He was, Ansel would admit later, an extremely good customer. He ate everything. He ate it in the right order. He asked one question about the pickled radish and then shut up and let the man work. And when he was done, he sat back and put both hands on the counter and said, straight out, that he was the reason. The reason for what? For all of this. He tipped his head at the window, where the queue was still going around the corner. "I was up at 4 in a hole of people cooking on the internet. That is the entire glamorous story. Your kid was live to 11 people, and I was one of them. I clipped it, I put it up, and that is what happened to you." He shrugged. "I wanted to say it to your face instead of you finding it in a comment, because I think you'd hate that more." Ansel stood there with a towel in his hands. "I'm not asking you to thank me," Dane said. "I know what I've done to your week. Do you? Some of it." He said it easily and without flinching. He never pretended to be smaller than he was. Not all of it. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think I can know all of it, but I'd like to help fix the part I broke, and I'd also like to keep eating here. And I would like those to be two separate conversations so you don't feel like I'm charging you for the first one. He came back the next day, and the day after that. He tracked down the man with the clipboard, put him on the door and paid his wages, and then lost a solid week of arguing about whether he was allowed to. Ansel found it so annoying that he started making Dane wait for a table like everybody else. Dane loved it. He was easy to like, and it took Ansel a long time to work out that this was the problem. Dane looked at him with a warmth that was completely real and pointed slightly to the left of where he actually was. He talked about the video the way people talk about a place they went on holiday. He said, "More than once, the thing about you is," and then he described a man who was patient and unbothered and quietly wise. A man who did everything on purpose, a man at peace before dawn with a small child in a pot. Ansel was not at peace before dawn. Ansel was awake before dawn because he had a mortgage on the equipment and a daughter with feet that grew and a permanent low-grade terror that had been running in the background of his life since he was 26. He said none of that. He said, "That's kind," and went back to the pass. Marek came at his usual hour on the Thursday and stood in the alley doorway with a crate on his hip and said nothing at all for a while, and that was so unlike him that Ansel looked up. "What?" "Nothing." He put the crate down. "There's a queue. In the dark. For soup." "It's not soup." "There's a queue in the dark for the thing that is not soup," Marek said. And then he was quiet again. And then he said, "That fella with the camera. He's in here every day." "He is." "Right." Ansel pulled a pepper out and turned it and put it back. "You've gone strange." "And?" "I've not gone strange. You've gone strange, Marek." Marek looked at the alley wall for a second. He had a face that hid nothing and had never needed to. And Ansel watched it try to hide something for the first time in 2 years and make an absolute disaster of it. "I've been coming to this door twice a week for 2 years, Marek said. "I know. Do you?" Marek. "I do you first on the round," Marek said. "You know that? You're not on the way. You're the wrong direction out of the depot and I do you first. And I've been telling myself for 2 years it's because you checked the crates properly." He picked the crate back up because his hands needed something. "Then some lad puts you on the internet, and half the city works out in a week. What I've been standing in this alley knowing since the first winter." Ansel did not say anything. He could not think of a single word. "Don't answer it," Marek said. "I'm 40, and I'd rather not be the man who did this at your back door before 6. I'm just done pretending I come here for the coffee. You've never once drunk the coffee." "I know," Marek said. "It's terrible coffee," and they both laughed. Badly. It did not fix anything, but it made it possible to keep standing there. When he drove off, Ansel stayed in the alley with the crate at his feet for longer than he had time for. Something had changed in the air, and Marek was not the whole of it. He noticed it that week in the room. Alphas came in now, a great many of them. More than had come through that door in 6 years. And they came in for the reason people were now coming in for, and the room was 9 seats wide and had no distance in it anywhere. 2 of them left a number under a glass. One asked him, pleasantly, in front of his own daughter, whether he was bonded, and Ansel said the set was the only thing on the menu, and turned to the pass. He had not thought about being an Omega in a professional sense in years. He worked, he went up the stairs, he slept. He was not on suppressants. They cost money and there had been no reason on earth to bother, and his cycle had gone somewhere quiet and irregular, which is what a body does when it has been running on nothing since the girl was born. Now the room was full for every service, and half of them were watching him like something they had already decided about, and his own kitchen started to feel like a corridor. He ran the extractor from the moment he unlocked until the moment he locked. He started shutting for an hour in the middle of the morning to walk Nell to school and opening again after. It lost him money and it bought him the only stretch of the day in which nobody looked at him. She was years off presenting and had no idea what any of it was about, and that was the only mercy in the whole business. What she did know was that people at the school gate had started looking at her father. And she had begun, without ever being told to, holding his hand on that street when she had stopped holding it everywhere else. And then, On a Wednesday, the bell over the door went and the room got very slightly quieter, and a man came in and sat down at the end of the counter, on the last stool before the corner, and Ansel turned around with a bowl in each hand and forgot what he was holding. He had not seen him in 7 years, and he had spent all 7 of them being extremely careful never to picture him. The man was older in a way that suited him. Good coat, no tie, a watch that had been expensive a long time ago. He had his hands on the counter and he was not doing anything with his face at all, and Ansel understood, with a horrible lurch, that the man had decided before he came through the door exactly how much he was going to show. "Hello," Jiwon said. There were other people in the room. Ansel put both bowls down in front of the right customers, and he was proud of that later, and then he stood behind his own counter and could not make his mouth work. The scent got to him a half second after the face did, and it was worse. A face can be argued with. Warm motor oil and licorice root. And under it, faint, something green and bruised, the smell of a leaf crushed between 2 fingers. He had gone 7 years without smelling that, and his body did not care about the 7 years at all. His body was in a bar with a wall of bottles behind it, and a man leaning in to hear him over the noise. "You'll want the set," Ansel said. "It's the only thing. Then I'll have the set." He made it. He did not look up. He made it exactly as he made every other one, and he put it down and turned to the pass. And behind him he heard the spoon go in. And then, a long quiet. The room emptied slowly, as it always did in the last hour. Jiwon ate everything. He did not photograph it, and he did not comment on it, and he did not do the thing that people had started doing, which was look at Ansel's hands and then at Ansel's face to see whether he had noticed them looking. When the last of the others went out the door, he was still sitting there with his hands around the empty bowl. "Are you going to say anything?" Ansel said, to the sink. "I've been trying to work out what." He turned the empty bowl a little on the counter. "I stood outside a bit first. You can smell the food from the corner." He put both hands flat. "I didn't know it was you until somebody came out and I saw the back of your neck through the gap. Then I had to have a word with myself at a bus stop like a teenager. That's a first." "It isn't," Jiwon said. "I did a lot of it in a bar." Ansel shut the tap off. The room had that ringing quality it gets when the last customer has gone and the fans are still running. He turned around at last and looked at him properly, and there was the thing he had spent 7 years not picturing. Not the coat, not the watch, the mouth, and the shape of the jaw, and the small sideways set of the eyes. He saw it every morning of his life. He watched it eat cereal. "How did you find me?" he said. "I didn't find you." He looked at the bowl instead of at him. "Somebody sent me a video at 3 in the morning. Then 8 other people sent me the same video, because that is apparently what the world is now. I opened it because I had opened everything else." He stopped. "You said something of mine in it." "I did not." "You did." "Not a name." He looked up. "You said, half now and half later, because I like the smell in the afternoon. I'd heard you say something in that shape once before. About a completely different thing. At closing time. 7 years ago. And I have thought about it more than I would like to tell you." Ansel put the towel down because his hand was not steady. "I went back to that bar," Jiwon said. "Not once. For a long time. I had a first name and no number. Because I woke up and there was no number." He said it flatly. "I sat at that bar looking like a fool for the better part of a year, and then I stopped. At some point a man has to accept that somebody left on purpose. There was no accusation in it anywhere, and that was so much worse. You left on purpose. Yes. All right? That's it? All right? What would you like me to do?" Jiwon said. "You're a grown man. You made a decision about your own night and you didn't owe me a form." He stood up, and he was taller than Ansel remembered. He took out a card and set it on the counter and did not push it across. "I'm not making a scene in your restaurant. I came to see whether the man in that video was you, or whether I'd made you up. It's you. And now I'd like to come back and eat here," Jiwon said. "That's all. If you'd rather I didn't, say so, and you won't see me again. I mean that in the boring way, not the dramatic way." The kitchen fan ticked. Somewhere out on the street a bus went past with nobody on it. "Say no," Ansel thought. "Say no. Say it clearly. and lock the door, and go up the stairs. The set's the same every day, he said. You'll get bored. I doubt it, Jiwon said, and left. He came back on the Friday, and the Monday after that, and then most days. He sat in the same stool every time, the last one before the corner, and he came on his own and left his phone in his coat. He was polite to the man on the door, and he waited in the queue in the rain like everybody else. Ansel watched him do that from the window on a bad afternoon and could not explain to himself why it went through him like that. It was Marek who told him, in the alley, by accident. You know who was in your queue yesterday? I know a lot of people are in my queue. Jiwon, Marek said, and put a crate down. I buy off him. Everybody buys off him. Half this city's produce comes through his sheds, and if it doesn't come through his sheds, it comes through somebody who buys off his sheds. He said it without any edge at all, just a man telling another man the weather. He started with one van, drove it himself for years. He still turns up at the depot at 4 a.m. sometimes, and puts his hands on the pallets, which drives his own people mad. Ansel stood in the alley with a pepper in his hand. You all right? Fine. That night he went out to the bins after close and stood under the light, looking at the crates stacked by the back wall. There was a stencil on the side of them, the same 3 letters and the same green line he had been looking at twice a week for years, through 2 different delivery men, without ever once reading it. His name had been in this kitchen every morning since before Nell could walk. What came next did not happen fast, and that was what got underneath him. Ansel was braced for fast. He was braced for demands and lawyers and a man in a coat saying the word, my. What he got instead was a run of very small things, and not one of them was ever mentioned out loud. The crates started arriving better, not different. Better in a way only a person who checks would ever notice. The sort of stock held back for restaurants with a waiting list, and Marek delivered them with the face of a man carrying somebody else's letter. The walk-in compressor had been grinding since spring, and Ansel had been managing it with a wooden spoon and a prayer. It got fixed on a Tuesday while he was at the school gate, by 2 men who said the call was already paid for and would not take a name. Nell broke her school bag zip on a railing and cried about it, and left the bag on her stool in the corner, and somebody took it away in a coat pocket and brought it back the next day working. When Ansel said, very carefully, that he would like to pay for that, Jiwon looked at him with a face that gave him nothing and said, It's a zip. It's not a zip, it's a zip, Jiwon said, and ate his food. That was how he did it. He announced nothing, and he never put a name to any of it. And every time Ansel opened his mouth to have the conversation, the man took it off the table by refusing to hold the other end. Ansel would go up the stairs late and lie in the dark, furious, with his heart going. He liked him. He had liked him 7 years ago across a bar for a whole night, and he had spent 7 years insisting it was the drink. It was not the drink. It had been a whole night of a man asking him real questions and then shutting up while he answered them. It had been the moment somebody opened the door of that bar and the cold came in and the whole of him arrived at once, motor oil and licorice root and that bruised green thing underneath, and understood he had been sitting inside it for hours without noticing. It had been a hand at the small of his back going out into the cold. And it had been, in the morning, Ansel putting his shoes on in the corridor with his heart in his mouth, because he had a rule about this. The rule was very old and it was very simple. Ansel had been a thing somebody got stuck with. He had grown up in a house where he was a burden with a name. More than once, through a door, he had heard the sentence about what could have been done differently. He promised himself, when he was about 11, that nobody would ever be stuck with him again as long as he lived. Then he had been 26 in a chemist's toilet with a stick in his hand. He had stood there and thought about a stranger's face, and he had thought about picking up a phone and saying, "Hello, you don't know me. Here is the rest of your life," and everything in his body had said no. Not because the man was bad, because Ansel could not survive being that. He could not survive standing in a doorway watching someone decide, in real time, how to be decent about him. So he had kept her. And he had gone. And he had built a room with 9 seats in it, and put her name over the door. And the arithmetic had held ever since. Now the arithmetic was sitting at the end of his counter most days, eating everything he made and mending zips. It came to the surface on a wet Thursday, after close. Dane had stayed late to argue with him about a reservation list, and Marek had come back to the alley with a crate he had forgotten. Both of them ended up in the room at the same time as Jiwon, who was finishing his food slowly and being no trouble to anybody. That was how the three of them ended up in his 9 seats with nothing being said. Ansel had his back to the room, and behind him it had gone quiet in a way it had not done once in 6 years. 3 alpha cents in 9 seats, and the extractor could do nothing with any of them. Eucalyptus and coriander seed by the door, wet denim and horseradish root in the middle, and underneath both of those, not pushing, not needing to, the motor oil. Ansel stood at his own pass and breathed through his mouth like a man in a lift. "I'm not going to do this in front of him," Marek said. He meant Dane. "You can absolutely do it in front of me," Dane said. "I'll leave. I'm going to leave. I'm leaving." And he did not move at all. "I'm leaving. I'm leaving. I'm leaving." "Ansel, don't." "He waits in the queue," Marek said. "In the rain. A man with sheds. I've watched him do it twice now, and I've been standing there in a van going, why is that man in the rain? And this morning I worked out why, and I've been in a state about it all day." At the end of the counter, Jiwon put his spoon down. "You buy off me." "I do. It doesn't come into this. And I want it said out loud in this room. Because he'll worry about it later even if you don't." He turned then and looked at Marek. One man to another. "Your stock stays exactly as it is, whatever happens here. And if it ever changes, you come and find me. And whatever you do about it, you'll be in the right." Marek looked at him for a long moment. "All right," he said. "All right. That doesn't make me like you." "No," Jiwon said. "I didn't think it would." And then the back door opened, and Nell came in with her homework bag on her shoulder, and stopped. There were 3 grown men in the room, and none of them were eating. "Hi," she said. Ansel said her name. He heard himself say it, and heard how it came out. She went down the room to her corner. She had to squeeze past Jiwon to get to it, and she did it as she did it with everybody, sideways, holding her bag up so it would not catch, and she said, "Excuse me." And he moved his knees, and she got up onto the towel cushion and got her book out. Jiwon had turned right around on the stool when the door went, and now he did not turn back. He was looking at her, almost politely, and Ansel stood behind his counter with a towel in his hands, and no air anywhere in the building. He could see it happening. The man looked at the fringe that needed cutting, and at the mouth, and at the small sideways set of the eyes. He did not look away. And then he did the thing that cannot be undone, which was arithmetic. Nobody said anything. The extractor ran. "Nell," Ansel said, and his voice came out almost normal. "I've got homework. Take the homework up." She looked at the room. 6 years old, and she had the measure of it in about a second, and then she got down and took the biscuits and went, and the door at the bottom of the stairs clicked. Dane stood up, and Ansel would remember that he did it before anybody had to ask. "Right," he said. "I actually am leaving." He put a hand briefly on Marek's shoulder going past, and Marek, after a second, went with him. Neither of them looked back. The front door shut, and the bell over it went and then stopped. Jiwon stayed where he was, at the end of the counter, with his hands flat on the wood. He did not say, "Is she mine?" He did not say, "How old is she?" He did not say any of the sentences Ansel had spent years rehearsing answers to in the middle of the night. What he said in the end, low and rough, was, "Her name's Nell. Yes, it's over the door. Yes, I've driven past that door," Jiwon said. "I've driven past that door in a van." And then he stopped and put one hand over his mouth and held it there. Ansel watched a man who had not shown him one single thing in all those weeks come apart and put himself back together badly, and it took about as long as it takes to fill a glass. "Sit down," Ansel said. "I'm sitting." "Then stay sitting. Because if you stand up, I'm going to say something I can't take back." He put both hands on the counter to hold himself in one place. "Ask me. Ask me." "No. Ask me." "I'm not asking you," Jiwon said. "If I ask, you're answering. Across your own counter. I'm not doing that to you." He took his hand away from his mouth. His eyes were red at the rims. "So I'll say what I know and you can correct me. She's 6. I can count. I've been counting since she went past my knees. She's 6. Right. She'll be 7 in the spring. Jiwon nodded slowly, once, and said nothing for a while. In the voice of a man walking on something thin. That's the only thing I've got. I've had about a minute and that is the whole of what came out of it. Be careful. So I'll be slow, and you'll have to put up with that. That was when Ansel started shaking. Not visibly, at first. It started in his hands and went up his arms, and he turned away and pretended to check a burner that was already off. You could shout, he said. Most people would shout. What would that get me? It'd be fair. It'd be loud, Jiwon said. There's a kid upstairs. She'll have heard the fans go off. Ansel put his palms flat against the steel and shut his eyes. I didn't do it to hurt you. His voice came out wrong, too fast and too flat, and the words did not go in the right order. I want you to know that. Or I don't. Actually, I don't know what I want you to know. Because it doesn't matter what I meant, it only matters what I did, and what I did is I stood in a chemist and looked at a wall of shampoo for about an hour and I couldn't ring you. I got as far as the number twice. He stopped. He started again. It wasn't about you. That's the part that's going to sound like a lie, and it isn't. I didn't ring you because I couldn't stand in a doorway and watch you be decent about it. I'd rather have done the whole thing on my own than watch somebody's face do that. There was a long silence. Why? Jiwon said. Why what? Why would my face do that? Because everybody's does, Ansel said. Because I grew up as the thing somebody got stuck with, and I heard it through a door, and I decided when I was about 11 that nobody would ever have to be polite about me again. He heard it come out of his own mouth, and hated all of it. You can say it's stupid. It's not stupid, Jiwon said. It's wrong. That's worse. He turned the empty bowl a quarter turn on the counter, and did not argue with that. He stood up and put his coat over his arm. In a room that had gone from 9 seats to about the size of a lift. I'm going home, he said. I'll come Friday, because I said I would. I don't want the first thing she ever sees me do to be disappearing. He got as far as the door. I'm not telling her anything. That's yours. Jiwon. He stopped with his hand on it and did not turn around. I'd like to be in the room. Not her father. Not out loud. Not in front of her. In the room. A long pause. You push a bowl down that counter with 2 fingers so the spoon points the right way. I'd like to be somewhere I can watch that happen more often than I do. He opened the door. Don't answer now. You look like you're about to fall over. Jiwon. He stopped. She likes your smell, Ansel said. She said it. Weeks ago. She said the man at the end smells like the garage where we get the tires. She meant it as a compliment. He held on to the door. I told her not to say things like that to customers, and then I went upstairs and sat on the bottom step for 20 minutes. Jiwon stood in the open door with the rain coming down behind him and did not say anything at all. And then he said, "Good night, Ansel," and pulled it shut so gently the bell did not even ring. He came on the Friday. He ate. He said hello to Nell and asked her nothing, and she told him about a boy at school called Otto who had eaten a pencil. And he listened to all of it as though it were a report from a board, and it would have been funny if Ansel had been able to breathe. That was how the next stretch went. It should have been unbearable. Instead, it was the best month Ansel had had since Nell was born. The man was in the room. That was all. He was in the room at the end of the counter with his coat on the hook, and when the queue got stupid, he went out and stood in it, and when Nell needed the light on for her homework, he moved without being asked so his shoulder was not in the way. He learned the order of the regulars. He got into a low-grade war with Winnie about a politician, and she enjoyed it more than anything that had happened to her in years. He never used a word that would have made anything official. And Ansel, who had built his entire adult life around not needing anybody in the room, found that he had started listening for the bell. It got worse after that, or better, and he could not have told anybody which. There was a Sunday, his day, when it rained so hard the alley flooded at the drain. Jiwon turned up in old clothes with a wrench and no explanation, and lay down in the dirty water to clear it. Ansel stood over him with a torch, looking at a man in a wet shirt with his arm down a drain, and thought, with total clarity, oh no. There was the night the second extractor packed in mid-service. The new one went in that week and cost him a month. And there was Jiwon coming behind the counter without asking. Nobody was allowed to do that. Ansel opened his mouth to say so, and what came out was, "Plates go on the left." The man did exactly what he was told for the rest of that service. In a kitchen he did not know, taking instruction from someone younger than him without one word of resistance. Something in Ansel's chest turned over and stayed turned over. Then there was the storeroom. It was a Wednesday, and it was late, and Nell was upstairs asleep, and Ansel was up on the third shelf looking for the good vinegar, and Jiwon came in with the crate and stopped. Ansel had come down off the shelf and turned around, and they were suddenly a hand's width apart in a room the size of a wardrobe. Neither of them moved. It had been building for weeks. The slow build that happens when two people are being careful. Now the door was half shut, and the light was the bad yellow one, and Ansel could smell him properly, without the kitchen over the top of it. Motor oil and licorice root and, underneath, that crushed green thing he had finally got a name for. Geranium leaf. And it was stronger than it had ever been. "That's new," Ansel said. And it did not come out as his own voice. "It's not new. It's stronger. It's you," Jiwon said. "It does that near you. It's been doing it since the first afternoon, and I have been extremely polite about it." Ansel put the bottle down on the shelf behind him without looking, and it took him 2 goes. "You should go," he said. "Say it again, and I will." He did not say it again. Jiwon put one hand flat on the shelf beside Ansel's head without touching him, and it was worse than touching him. He was close enough that Ansel could feel the warmth coming off his shirt. "Tell me to stop," he said. "I'm not going to." "Then tell me to keep going, because I'm not doing this on a guess." "Keep going," Ansel said, and his voice cracked on the second word, and he heard the sound Jiwon made low in his throat and lost the rest of the sentence. He was kissed against a shelf of tinned tomatoes with a hand in his hair. It was not gentle, and it was not quick. It was thorough. The man was thorough about everything. Ansel got a fistful of the front of that shirt and pulled, and after that he stopped caring about anything else in the building. His back was against the shelf. There was a knee between his and the whole length of the man pressed up the front of him, and when the kiss came off his mouth and went down along his jaw to the place under his ear where the gland sits, he made a noise he had not made in 7 years, and heard it come back off the tins. Their scents did what scents do, except it was not a mixture and it was not one laid over the other. It was something neither of them had ever smelled before. Warm and green and metallic at the same time, like a road going soft in the sun with all the windows down. Ansel got a lungful of it and understood exactly how much trouble he was in. Jiwon's mouth was at his throat. His hand had gone under the apron and flat against Ansel's stomach and stopped there, holding, not moving. "Say it," Ansel said. "Say what?" "Anything." "You never say anything." Jiwon lifted his head. He looked at him from very close, with his hair ruined and his breathing gone completely to pieces. And what he said was, "I have been standing in a queue in the rain." "That's not a sentence." "It's the only one I've got," Jiwon said, and kissed him again. They did not go upstairs. Ansel had a rule about upstairs, and he never had to say it out loud, because the man found the line in the dark on his own and stopped at it. Later he thought about that more than he thought about the kissing. He walked him to the front door in the small hours with his apron strings undone and his mouth swollen and his hands not working properly. "Wednesday," Jiwon said. "You come Wednesdays anyway." "I'm aware." He got out into the street and Ansel shut the door and leaned his forehead on it. And upstairs a 6-year-old slept through the entire thing. The bad week started with a phone, the same as the good one had. It was Dane who rang him, and Dane never rang. Dane turned up. "Ansel, are you sitting down?" "I'm plating." "Put the plate down." He did not put the bowl down, so he was holding it when Dane said, in a voice with all the shine gone out of it, that somebody had made a video. Not of him, about him. Somebody with too much time had gone through the little account. Every clip on it. Months of a 6-year-old filming chairs and pots and her own feet, which was a great deal more than Ansel had looked at since he stopped checking on Sundays. In one of them, a Friday, she had been filming her own homework, and a man at the end of the counter had come into the corner of the shot. And she had not said it out loud, and she had not deleted it. Somebody had frozen that frame and put it beside a frame of Nell laughing, and then had written one sentence underneath it. "It's got 2 million on it," Dane said. "It had 400,000 when I rang my guy. It's going to be everywhere by tonight and I cannot stop it, and I want to be very clear with you that I have tried. I have called in every single thing I have, and it will not go back in the box. A breath. I put you up there. I know what I'm saying. Ansel stood in his kitchen with a bowl in his hand and looked down the room at his daughter, who was at the end of the counter with her tongue between her teeth doing a page of subtraction, and who had the tablet propped against the napkins on the stool beside her where she could see it. He put the bowl down. He went to the door and told the man with the clipboard to close it. Now. Nobody else. The man looked at his face and did it without a question. Behind him, the last few people finished and let themselves out, and every one of them left their money on the counter. He found it in a stack the next morning and could not look at it. By the time the room was empty, he was already too late. She had the tablet up against the napkins and she was not doing subtraction anymore, and the screen had two faces on it side by side, and Nell was looking at them with her head tipped over the way she looked at a word she had not met before. Nell, this is the man at the end, she said. Give me that. Why is my face next to his face? He took the tablet out of her hands and turned it over. And he was too rough with it. And she flinched, and he felt it land. He got down on the floor, because he had promised himself he would never do the important ones standing up, and there he was on tiles he had grouted himself, with his daughter's knees at his chest, and nothing prepared at all. Is he my dad? Nell said. The extractor ran. Somewhere behind him a pot went on doing what pots do. There had been a version of this in his head for years, built slowly in the small hours. In it she was older. In it they were upstairs on the sofa with the good blanket. In it he had days of warning and a beginning and a middle and an end, and he got to say the sentence he had written, which started with, "When I was 26, and I want you to know that none of this is about you." He got none of that. Yes, he said. Nell looked at him. She had flour on her jumper and a pencil still in her fist. Did you know? She said. And that was the one. Out of everything the world could have done to him that day, it was his own 6-year-old, asking the only question that actually mattered, in a voice with nothing in it. Yes, Ansel said. I knew. The whole time. The whole time. Did he know? No, he said. He found out a few weeks ago. In this room. He found out the same way you just did. Except he didn't say anything, because he thought it was mine to tell you. His voice went. And I didn't tell you. I kept meaning to, and I kept not doing it, and then a stranger did it, and I'm not going to explain it now. I haven't got a good explanation. I've got a reason. It's mine, not yours, and you shouldn't have to carry it. Nell got down off the stool. I want to go upstairs, she said. Nell, I want to go upstairs. So he took her up. She got into the bed with her shoes on, and he did not fight her about it, and she turned her face to the wall. He sat on the floor beside the bed with his back against it and his apron still on, and he stayed there while the light went out of the window, and downstairs a pot he had forgotten went dry on a burner nobody had turned off. Jiwon came at his usual hour that evening, and the door was locked and the lights were off. He stood outside and rang, and Ansel came down and opened it a hand's width with the chain on. He had never done that in his life. He had only ever seen people do it in films. She saw it, he said. I know. I saw it an hour ago. She asked me, and I said yes, and then she asked me if I knew. He held the door where it was. She's not talking to me. She's in bed with her shoes on, and she's not talking to me. Ansel, you need to go. Jiwon stopped. In the light off the street, he looked older than he had ever looked, and he had come straight from somewhere, in a shed coat thrown over a good shirt. All right, he said. That's it? You've told me to go, Jiwon said. I'm not standing on your doorstep at night arguing you out of a decision about your own child. That's the thing you were afraid of. I'd be it. He put his hands in his pockets and did not go. Ansel did not close the door either. They'd not have had a face to use if I hadn't been sitting there, Jiwon said. That's mine. He looked at the pavement. I've been in the car most of the evening trying to work out how I could have been in that room without being in the shot. There isn't a way. That's all I've worked out. Go home, Ansel said. Yes, Jiwon. He waited. Ansel stood with his hand on the chain and could not get any of the things in his chest up into his mouth, and what came out instead was, She's got your jaw. I know, Jiwon said. I've been looking at it all night. And he went. Ansel shut the restaurant. He put a piece of paper in the window that said closed for a while, with no reason on it. Within an hour, somebody had photographed the piece of paper, and by morning the piece of paper had a life of its own on the internet. He took it down and put up nothing at all. And they photographed that too. The days after that ran together, and he was never afterwards able to put them back in order. Nell would not talk to him for days. Not in a dramatic way. She talked about cereal and about Otto and his hamster, which was not well, and she did not talk about the other thing at all. She stopped coming into the kitchen, which she had done every day of her life. The empty stool in the corner, with its folded towel on it, was an object he could not be in a room with. A few nights in, she came out of the bedroom and stood in the doorway and said, "Was he nice? Was who nice? When you met him?" Ansel put the cup down. "He was nice," he said. "He asked me a lot of questions and then he actually listened to the answers, which is rarer than you'd think. And he made me laugh about 4 times. And he had a bad haircut." Did he have a bad haircut? Terrible. It was 7 years ago, everyone did. Nell thought about it. "I'm not angry at you," she said, and went back to bed. And he stood in the kitchen and cried for the first time since she was a baby with a fever he could not get down. The crates kept coming, and that was the thing he had not braced for. Twice a week, before light, there were crates by the back wall, stacked properly with the good stuff on top. No van in the alley, no note, no name. The restaurant was shut, so there was nothing to do with any of it. He gave the first lot to Winnie. He gave the second lot to the taxi drivers. After a while, he was walking a crate of pears up to the school office and telling the woman there it was surplus. He knew who it was. Of course he knew who it was. He stood in the alley at his black hour more than once with his hand on the stencil on the side of a crate. And he never caught him. The man was not there to be caught. Marek came on a Sunday, on his own time, and stood in the alley with his hands hanging. "I'm not going to ask how you are," he said, "because you'll say fine. I'm fine. There it is." He had brought bread from somewhere, and a bag of the small tomatoes Nell liked, and he put them on the step rather than handing them over. And Ansel noticed that. "I'm taking myself out of it," Marek said. "Marek." He looked at the wall. "I'd have got up early. I'd have been good with her." He rubbed the back of his neck. "And I stood in your restaurant and watched that man tell me my stock wouldn't change, when he could have said nothing and let me wonder about it for a year." He shifted his feet. "I've been driving round all week annoyed about that. It was right. I'd not have thought of it. That's not a reason to stand down." "No." Marek shifted the bread on the step with his boot. "I looked at your face when he walked in. 2 years I've been coming to this door. I've never got that face." Ansel opened his mouth and Marek held a hand up. "I'm still doing your round," he said. "First, same as always. Don't insult me by going to somebody else. I'll find out, and I'll be at this door about it." He got in the van and then leaned back out. "Open the restaurant. I mean it. You built that room out of nothing, and you're going to let a picture on the internet shut it. That's mad. I'll think about it." "Right," Marek said, and drove off. And Ansel sat down on the step in the alley for a while. Dane did the other thing, and he did it without asking. He took it all down. Every clip of Ansel he had ever put up, the first one included. The one that had made his year included. In their place, he put a short, flat message with no music on it, saying he had made a mistake with somebody else's family, that he had removed everything, and that he would appreciate it if people stopped sending him the side-by-side. Then he turned the comments off, which for a man like him was surgery. He rang afterwards, once. "I'm not fishing," he said. "One thing. Then I'll leave you alone for a very long time." He sounded tired. "I fell for a video. I've been telling myself I fell for you. A breath. I met you, 20 times. And Ansel stood there with the phone against his ear and finally understood why that scent had never once pushed at him. "Dane." "Yeah. Come and eat when I open," Ansel said. "Wait in the queue like everyone else." "I'll queue," Dane said, and there was a bit of his old voice in it, and he rang off. His cycle arrived a few weeks in, at the worst moment it could have picked, and it was entirely predictable because his body had been running on nothing for years and had chosen the one moment there was no scaffolding under him at all. He felt it start on a Tuesday, the low fever coming up under the skin and the noise of the fridge going unbearable. And every soft thing in the flat suddenly the wrong texture. And he did what a man alone does, which was plan. He did not go looking for suppressants. You cannot stop one that has already started, not without doing yourself harm that stays done, and he had been stupid about exactly that once in his 20s and had promised himself never again. So he rang Winnie. He said, with as much dignity as he could manage, that he was unwell for a few days and asked if she could do the school run. And Winnie, who had taught for a lifetime and seen everything, said, "I'll take her the week, and next weekend as well, and don't argue with me. I'll tell her it's a holiday." He got through it upstairs with the blinds down and the phone off and the front door bolted. The bolt was the part that mattered, because his street knew what he was now, and so did a lot of people who did not live on it. It ran longer than it should have, and it was worse than it had been in years, because there was nothing to push against and nobody to be strong in front of. Somewhere in the middle of it, he found himself on the floor of his own bedroom in a nest made out of every soft thing in the flat, holding a shed coat Jiwon had left on the hook by the alley door one wet night and never asked for back, with his face in it, hating himself. The worst of it was not the fever. It was that his body kept trying to send for somebody, over and over, all night, and there was nobody the signal was going to reach. When the fever broke, he lay there in the gray light and looked at the ceiling. He had done all of it on his own. The pregnancy alone, the first year, the second, the third, the ovens and the grout and the fever nights and the school forms and every black hour of it. On his own. And he had been proud of that. And it had cost him nothing to be proud of it until now, and he lay there on the floor holding somebody else's coat and did not put it down. He got up eventually. He drank water. He put the coat back on the hook and then took it down again and folded it and left it on the end of the bed, where its owner would find it the following night and say nothing about it at all. On the till downstairs there was still a card he had never moved and never rung. The next morning, before light, Ansel got in a taxi and went to the depot. It was a long shed on an industrial road with the lights already on and forklifts moving in the dark, and nobody stopped him. A man in work clothes walking in at that hour is invisible everywhere in the world. He found him at the far end with his sleeves pushed up and both hands on a pallet of crates, arguing quietly with a woman holding a tablet about whether a load could be turned around, and Ansel stood between two stacks and watched him a moment, and thought, he really does put his hands on it. Then Jiwon looked up. Whatever had been in his face went out of it, and he said something to the woman, and she looked once at Ansel and had the great good sense to leave, and then the two of them were standing in a shed with a pallet of winter citrus between them. "You've been leaving crates," Ansel said. "Yes. For 3 weeks. Yes. You never knocked." "No," Jiwon said. "Why not? Knocking would have made it a question," he said, "and then you'd have had to answer it, and you had a child upstairs who wasn't talking to you." He wiped his hands on a cloth. "It's produce. It doesn't ask you anything." "She's at Winnie's till Sunday," Ansel said, which was not what he had come to say. "All right." He had something prepared and it went straight out of his head, as it always did. "I did the same thing to you twice." Jiwon put the cloth down on the pallet. 7 years ago I decided for you. In a chemist's. On my own. Ansel's hands had started up again, and he put them in his pockets. "And I've spent 7 years telling myself that was a kind thing to do." He stopped and started again. "Worse. Then 3 weeks ago I did it again. She saw that thing on a screen and I got so ashamed of myself that I looked round for somebody to hand it to. So I handed it to you. I stood in a doorway and sent a man home for something he hadn't done. Ansel, I'm not finished. If I stop, I won't start. It came out badly. You never took anything off me. Nobody. I gave it. I gave it away. And then I went round for 7 years like somebody had come and taken it off me. And nobody did that. I did." He ran out. He looked at the crates. "I don't know how to say the last bit. Say it wrong. I was frightened you'd be kind about it." Ansel said, "That was the whole thing. That was 7 years. The forklifts went on somewhere behind them, and you were kind about it, and it didn't kill me. I could have found that out in an afternoon." Jiwon came around the pallet. "Can I say mine? You don't have one." 3 weeks and a lot of driving," Jiwon said. "I have one." He stopped an arm's length away. "I didn't fight for you. I sat at that bar looking for a stranger, and I called it romantic, and it was lazy. I had your first name and I knew where you worked. You told me, A kitchen with a bad extractor on the other side of the city. I never got in the van and drove there. He shook his head. So don't stand in my shed and tell me you're the only coward in it. I've had a lot of practice. I'm tidier about it, that's all. That's not the same. No, Jiwon said. You were pregnant and I was sulking. It's not the same. I'm not asking for a draw. Then, after a moment, but I did drive past that door. Not once. I've driven past that door 100 times, and there's a name over it, and I never looked up. And every time I think about that, I want to put my hand through a wall. Ansel could not see him very clearly anymore. Say something, he said. You never say anything. Jiwon opened his mouth and shut it again, and then he said, I don't want to be a man who eats here. They both heard how that had come out. That's not what I meant. I've had it in my head for weeks, and it was better in the van. No, Ansel said. And Ansel crossed the last of the distance and got both hands in the front of that shirt again, and it was not tidy at all. He was kissed against a stack of crates in an open shed with people down at the other end of it, and neither of them cared. Jiwon's hands went into his hair, then down his back, then locked at the base of his spine and hauled him in. Ansel had one leg hooked around him, and his mouth open, and both of them were making a complete mess of the breathing. Their scents came up together into that impossible third thing, the warm, green, metallic road-in-the-sun smell that belonged to neither of them alone. Somebody down the shed whistled, and Jiwon took one hand off Ansel's back and made a gesture at them without once taking his mouth away. And Ansel laughed into the kiss. He stopped laughing very quickly. A hand had gone up under his shirt and flat between his shoulder blades and pulled, and his knees did not hold. Not here, Jiwon said against his jaw, in a voice that had dropped all the way through the floor. No. I'm putting you in a car. Yes, I'm putting you in a car. I'm driving you home, and then I'm standing at your back door like I'm dropping off crates. Because you're still shaking. Jiwon. What? Don't stand at the door, Ansel said, and watched the last of whatever the man had left go out from under him. They did not make it further than the bottom of the stairs, and then they did. It was slow, and it took what was left of the morning. Long afterwards, Ansel lay with his face in the crook of a shoulder and a hand moving in his hair, and the whole flat smelled of the two of them at once. Neither of them said the word bond. Both of them were thinking it. The rest of it took a while, and it was not a montage. Nell came home on the Sunday, and Ansel sat down with her on the sofa with the good blanket, which was late but it was not useless, and told her the whole thing properly. He told her about a bar. He told her about a chemist's. He told her the part he had promised himself he would never say to her, which was that he had been frightened of being a burden, and that he had been so busy making sure she never felt like one that he had accidentally decided a lot of things on her behalf. That's not fair, Nell said. No, you should have asked me. You weren't born. You should have asked me after, she said. And he told her she was right. And she said, I know, and leaned into his side and stayed there. She would not see Jiwon for a good stretch after that. Ansel let her not. She asked questions instead. At odd hours, at the worst possible moments, in the bath and at the school gate, and once, loudly, in a chemist's, which he took as a bill coming due. Does he have a mum? Is he cross with me? Does he like the food? Or does he only say he likes the food? Will he still come, if I'm rude to him? That last one Ansel took very seriously. Yes, he said. You can be rude to him. You can be rude to him for a year. He'll keep coming, and he won't be nice about it in a way that's a trick. He'll just keep turning up, and that's how you'll know. She tested it. Of course, she tested it. The first time she came down and found him in the room, she looked straight through him and asked her father for a drink, and Jiwon said, There's a jug there. I filled it, and left it entirely alone, and got no reward for it whatsoever, and came back the next day. It took the winter, and it was made of very small things. He learned her reading book. He mended a chair leg. He drove her to a birthday party and waited outside in the car the entire time, because she had asked him not to come in. Nell reported this to her father that night in the tone of somebody lodging a complaint. He waited. He just sat there, and he said it was fine because he had the radio, and she did not accept that for a second. The night she called him by his name instead of nothing at all, Ansel had to go and stand in the walk-in. The other thing, the public thing, Jiwon did on his own, and told Ansel afterwards, which was the only real argument they had that year. He had never put anything on the internet in his life. He did it once. No music, no cuts. A shed office with a bad light behind him. He said his own name and his own business. Then he said the child in those clips was his daughter, that he had not known about her until recently, and that this was his doing and nobody else's. He said the man who raised her had done it on his own and done it well. Then he said anyone with an opinion about it could bring it to him personally, and he gave his address. Then he shut his phone in a drawer and went to work. It ate him alive for weeks. It was on the news. It was on the kind of program where people sit on sofas. He was a private man who had spent his whole working life being no more visible than a stencil on the side of a crate, and he burned every bit of that in one go. And it worked. There is nothing the internet loses interest in faster than a story where somebody has simply told you the answer. "You should have asked me," Ansel said, furious in the alley. "You'd have said no. That's what asking is." "You'd have said no," Jiwon said again, "and she'd have gone back to school with people asking her, and I've got one thing that's actually mine to spend, and that was it." He put the crate down. "It's the only time I'll do that. You can be angry for a week." Ansel stayed angry for a while, and then he did not, and then he pushed him into the storeroom. Nell's opened again in the spring. He had spent the winter regrouting a floor that did not need it, and refusing money, and being extremely polite about refusing it, right up until the night the equipment payment went out and did not clear. Jiwon did not offer again. He put a bank card on the kitchen table and said, "That's for the ovens, not for you. It's the same thing. It isn't, and you know it isn't. And you'd say the same to me if my sheds went down." He did not push it across the table, the same as he had never pushed the card across the counter. "Take it or don't. I'm not going to sit here and talk you into it." Ansel looked at it for a long time, then he picked it up. It took him longer than the floor had. By March, he had run out of excuses, and Marek had run out of patience. It opened differently. One sitting. A list, drawn once a month, by lottery. Which meant most of the people who wanted to be seen there never got in, and most of the people who just wanted to eat did. No photographs of the room. A different set every day, same as it ever was. The man with the clipboard got a proper job with proper hours, and the queue in the dark stopped existing, and the street went back to being a dry cleaner, a shoe repair, and a bus stop with a cracked bench. Winnie kept her stool, and the taxi drivers kept theirs. Dane's name came out of the first draw, and he told everybody it was rigged, which it was not. He came on the opening morning and did not film anything, and he ate the lot and told Ansel it was better than the video. And then, being who he was, told him twice more. Marek did the round first, out of the wrong direction from the depot, and complained about the tape on the knife handle. They did not bond, not for a long time. They simply lived close enough that everybody in the trade could smell it on the pair of them, that road in the sun thing, and after that, no alpha came near Ansel's counter with any ideas, and nobody asked either of them a single question about it. Nell, who noticed everything, said one evening that they had started smelling the same and that it was weird, and went back to her book. And every morning before light, in a kitchen with the burners already going, a girl who had just turned 7 sat on a folded towel in the corner at the end of the counter, and there was a second man in the room now, doing the vegetables badly and being corrected without mercy. Ansel's kitchen was Ansel's kitchen, and that had never been in question. One morning that summer, Nell announced that she was retiring. "From what?" "My show," she said. "I'm retiring. From the show. From everything. Because it got big, and now it's no fun." Nell thought about that and decided it was hers. "Yes," she said. "Can I do a last one? A live one?" The rule had been never. Ansel heard himself change it. "Point it at the bowl," he said. "Not at us. Just the bowl." "It's Thursday," Nell said. He stopped with the ladle halfway. It had been sitting in that homework book for a year, and she had been waiting for him the whole time. "So it is. I'm closing the restaurant. Ask me next Thursday," Ansel said. And she wrote that down too. And then she pointed the phone at the bowl. He built one portion out of the batch, quick and exact. Broth. The meat laid flat. A spoon of the pickled radish. The greens in and out. The chili oil in a ring. One piece of spring onion cut so thin it curled by itself. He set it down in the middle of the frame. Then he said, to a lot of people, he would never meet. That's the last one. Thanks for watching my daughter's program. Then he turned the bowl so the spoon handle pointed the right way and pushed it down the counter with 2 fingers. She caught it with both hands. Off camera, Jiwon said. Is it as good as Tuesday? And Nell, with her mouth full, said, nothing is as good as Tuesday. Her father laughed. Then a small hand came into the frame and pressed the red circle, and that was the end of her program. They bonded that autumn, in the flat above the shoe repair, on a day he shut the restaurant for no reason at all. He had given up a Sunday to the grout every spring since he opened, and he had shut the doors properly only once, for the worst winter of his life, and now he shut them because he wanted to. He asked for it, and that was the part he wanted to be true. And it was true. He got it out in the kitchen with a tea towel still in his hand, and it stopped twice on the way. He had spent his whole life making sure nobody ever got stuck with him. He would like, please, to be stuck with somebody. On purpose. Jiwon put his forehead against Ansel's and stayed there for a long time. It hurt more than he had expected, and he did not mind. Afterwards, he lay with his face against a shoulder and felt the other man's pulse come up underneath his own, and everything he had been carrying on his own since the day she was born got quietly picked up at the other end. The wedding came that winter. It was small, and the restaurant was shut for it, which caused more public comment than the bonding did. And on the morning after they got back, before light, in a kitchen with the burners already going, Ansel put the bones on and built the base and tasted it twice. Once for the salt, once for whatever the first taste was too loud to hear. Behind him, a man who had learned exactly where to stand handed him the vinegar before he asked for it. It doesn't need it, Ansel said. It needs it. Give me the vinegar. That's what I said, Jiwon said. And at the end of the counter, a girl who was nearly 8 did not look up from her homework and said, he's right, Dad, and got told to do her subtraction. The end. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the story, tell me your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.